Hey everyone, welcome to episode 134 of the Sarah's podcast. It is really exciting to be in our sixth season of podcasting. We've been really busy putting some great episodes together. In the meantime, we are putting forward the fish and chip industry episodes as some of the topics we're discussing are quite time sensitive. We've also been pretty busy lately, but as a regular listener, you'll know that that's actually pretty normal. This week, we've had the Fish and Chip Awards, which was the first time that it was brought to us by the National Federation of Fish Fryers. I must admit, not like that it matters, but I think they did a grand job of putting on a great event. The delay in putting this episode out is also in part because I sort of knew that Hugh, the guest, was considered for a Lifetime Achievement Award, so we thought let's just hold off somewhat for a little while. So, a little bit of news. The Fish and Tips ebook is flying out, and the feedback has been really positive. To be fair, I want feedback whether you like it or don't like it. We also have a new website coming soon. The recipes are coming thick and fast, and we've got loads of different sort of irons in the fire. But now it's just a bit too premature to be discussing all of that. So, as I was saying about the Fish and Chip Awards, let's just run through the winners. So, the winners were Fish and Chip Takeaway of the Year. First, Whitehead's Fish and Chips, so well done to Jeff and the team. Second, Fish Kitchen, 1854. Third, The Fish Works in Largs. Fish and Chip Restaurant of the Year. First, Fish City in Belfast, so well done to John and the team. Molten Anchor in Cirencester came second. Third is Henry's of Hunstanton. Best Newcomer Award, Lighthouse Fisheries in Flamborough. From Field to Fryer Award, the Real Food Cafe in Tyndrum. The Best Mobile Operator Award, Pimp My Fish in Burwell. Staff Training and Development, the Chesterford Group from Bishop's Stortford, of who Hugh is the chairman. Best Multiple Operator of the Year Award, Harley's Fish and Chips down in Dorset. NFFF Quality Accreditation Champion, the Fish Works in Largs. Environment and Sustainability Award, Fish City in Belfast. Supplier of the Year Award, Henry Colbeck. Outstanding Achievement Award, Hugh Lipscombe, of who is on this podcast from the Chesterford Group. So a huge well done to everyone who entered and participated, and once again, well done to the National Federation of Fish Fryers for putting on a great event. The product focus of this episode is the Ceres Deep Fryer Cleaner. The benefits of regular boil outs they're just endless. But the fact is, cleaner fryers give you better oil life. That's just a fact. They give you lower gas use, better fried food, better temperature recovery. But one of the biggest positives is the fact that you are checking your pan integrity. A lot of these pans, especially with filtration system, they could cost, around 5-6 grand to change. So you really don't want to be left on a limb if one of those go. With luck, you can find out what's going on with a regular boil out. You can look at the integrity and deal with the problem before it becomes a big problem. Here's the rub of it. Your frying range or your fryers are a key piece of equipment. I'd imagine that your business couldn't run or function without them. And yet in many cases they are looked at once a year by a technician. Every day is autopilot. You just fry, skim, cool down, maybe filter, top up, restart the next day. But do you ever look at the metal and the integrity, the welds, to see how they're doing? Is there pitting? One of the key complaints we get of oil degradation is because of pitting. We've got articles on pitting, and that's where the metal has lost its sort of layer. I think it's the carbon layer, and it's just leaking out all of this raw metal, and it's just going to kill your oils. And if it's killing your oils, it's not going to be good for the food either. So, as confirmed by our customers, regular boil out routines will see you with better oil life, crispier and tastier food. So it's going to eliminate or at least drastically reduce off flavours in the oil, remove carbon and make your fryers cheaper to run. With this in logic, it will save you money and make you money. Stop losing customers and sales today. Implement a fryer boil out routine. The Ceres Deep Fryer Cleaner works with all frying ranges, all countertop fryers, all solo units, works with mild steel, stainless steel, you name it. Ask yourself if you can afford not to have a regular boil out routine. Order your Ceres Deep Fryer Cleaner today at worldofceres.com/shop. On to today's episode. Hugh Lipscombe is the founder and chairman of the Chesterford Group. Under their umbrella, you will see the brands Fish and Chicken, Bankers, Churchill's, and now new to the company, Pret a Manger. I don't want to say too much about all of this because, I want to keep this intro short and there was a lot of news. But in actual fact, if you want to hear more about the Chesterford Group, listen to this episode and you're already doing that. But I also suggest you listen to our episode with Hugh's son, the CEO, James Lipscombe, in episode 17 from 2019. I think we need to get James on again at some point. And their managing director, Paul Goodgame, in just recently in episode 129. So, let's get on with this episode. I hope you enjoy this episode with Hugh Lipscombe. Hugh, welcome to the Ceres podcast.
Hi, nice to see you and nice to be here.
It's fantastic to have you. I think we've got a great story lined up from you. I've been doing quite a lot of research, but it all hangs on, how you built this business. So tell everyone a little bit about the business you're in and how it all started.
Well, I was born in 1952 and my father was in the stock exchange before the war, and during the Second World War he sort of was busy chasing Germans, and when he came back he really didn't want to go back into the stock exchange, so he bought a wholesale fish business in Billingsgate.
Okay.
And then in the meantime, my grandfather, who he had worked in the coal mines in Yorkshire, and then he just before the First World War, and then he got coal on the chest and he moved over to Accrington, and where he worked in the sort of another industry, and then he played cricket for Accrington and he scored lots of runs and got lots of wickets, and in those days there were 3,000 or 4,000 people watching, and my nana saved all the money when they passed the bucket round. And in 1923, when the Depression came, they moved down south and bought a fish and chip shop in Rush Green in Romford. And then they sold that and then bought a shop in Harold Hill in 1952, which we've still got and is still operating. And that's where I cut my teeth in the shop in Harold Hill as a youngster. And I left school and went to college in Walthamstow, wanting to own my own hotel for some bizarre reason. And I realised I'd never get enough money to buy a hotel, so I sort of managed to scrape £12,500 together from a friend of my father's and opened my first shop in Pod Street in Harlow in 1970, which we still have.
Wow. And so you was working for your granddad, technically?
Yeah, I was working for my granddad, and then my father.
So what was it like working for both of those? What was it,
Well, my granddad had virtually, retired by that time, so I was really working with my dad. But, sort of as it was, he was had other interests. So we had a manager in the shop and I worked with the manager, and then he taught me the trade, and then I learnt, and then, when I was ready, we purchased my first shop in Potter Street in Harlow, which was...
Just thinking about the motivation behind your grandma for a moment. I guess back then, people would have had less choices, especially as a term of employment, but they saved the money and they wanted a fish and chip shop. Why specifically do you think they wanted a fish and chip shop? Why that type of self-employment?
I have never asked that question, actually. I've never asked my father that question, but it's something that, has been in our family's blood for a long time, and it's something that, I always enjoyed doing, and I enjoyed, the sort of the adrenaline rush in a very, very busy shop. And then I thought, well, this works, so I can replicate it. So, sort of went on to replicate it in Pod Street in Harlow, which has been incredibly successful since 1971. And then we bought, gradually sort of bought more shops, and then the business evolved to the business it is today.
So your dad was sort of like hands off then because he had another business. He sort of allowed you to cut your teeth in your own
Yeah, he
fashion.
did. Yeah, as I say, I worked with the manager, and then I cut my teeth, and then learnt about the trade, and then picked up on it. And something that I enjoyed doing working in the shop, and it was exceptionally busy. Because in those days there was no competition, so it was just a 1,000 square foot takeaway on a sort of a council estate that was built after the Second World War, like rather like Harlow and Basildon, and it was called Harold Hill. And we used to, I can remember, I used to bring 40 bags of potatoes over at 4 o'clock on a Friday, and they would be gone by 12 o'clock on Friday.
Oh,
So we used to use about 160 bags of potatoes a week in just purely a takeaway shop.
not
So
bad,
it
is it?
was it was extremely busy. But that was before Mr. McDonald came along and Mr. KFC and all the the various sort of competitors that we've got in the market today.
Yeah, I guess consumers really have an abundance of choice today.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's something I was going to come on to
Mm,
talk to you about. But
no.
yeah, so
Before we get there, what was the first shop called? Was it Fish and
fish
Chicken?
and chicken.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
it's the name that my mother came up with.
I see. So and was that like just any chicken or roast chicken or what?
Well, we sell sort of. I've always used sort of the best quality product that we can afford to give our customers. So we've always sort of used a fresh Norfolk chicken, 1.6, 1.7 kilo spit roast, and now it was purely spit roast at first. Then
Yeah.
we started, with southern fried, and we use henny pennies, and yeah, now we sell about 3,500 chickens a week.
Wow, it's quite impressive, isn't it? And I guess back then, like freshly rotisserie chicken would have been a really big deal. Like, because again, that would be quite maybe not exotic, but chicken was more expensive back then.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. No, I mean it was sort of quite a thing when we had the chicken spit, and sort of the public could see the chickens cooking on the spit, and it really went down very well. And again, when I first started, basically, we just sold fish and chips and sausages, and then sort of um, we then sort of thought, well, pies, and then we looked at, now we've, moved on to ribs, and we've got a lot bigger menu. We sell panko prawns now and various things that, we wouldn't sell before because, as I say, when I started, it was just basically fish and chips.
yeah,
And we did cod, haddock, plaice, skate, rock eel.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
the industry's changed hugely.
So did you ever work under your granddad, or was it just as you grew older? So did you start working when you was younger, let's say
Yeah,
teenagers?
I went to boarding school. And when I came home, I helped my dad in the shop,
Yeah.
sort of basically. And then when I left school and I went, as I say, I went to catering college and then realised I'd never be able to own my own hotel. I didn't want to work for anybody.
No, no, of
I've
course. That
always,
was
I've
never an
always
option, really, for
it
you.
wasn't
No.
because no, I just wouldn't be able to get the money. I mean, if you're looking at the equivalent, say, nearly £1 million now to buy a hotel.
What I meant more so, it was never an option for you in your mind to be employed as opposed to self-employed.
No, no, I always wanted to, sort of create a business, and that's something that I always aspired to do.
So when you started Fish and Chicken, how long was it before you then set up shop number two, roughly?
Well, probably a couple of years.
A couple of years. So for
Yeah.
you, essentially, the intention was always to grow it because you don't accidentally open a shop in a couple of years, I guess, do you? So
No, no. My intention was, sort of to look at it and try and build a business. And I sort of had help from my father, and then in those days, my two brothers were in the business as well. One was running the wholesale business in Billingsgate. My other brother was, sort of involved in the business. And then as time went on, I sort of bought my two brothers out.
I see. So
Yeah.
obviously we spoke about how little other food competition was. However, there was lots of other fish and chip competition, I'd imagine. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
so was that ever difficult at the time, or was there just so much consumer demand that it didn't feel like a problem?
I think there was so much consumer demand, and also, sort of, I mean, life's evolved, but I can remember, I was looking at your sort of the questions, and when I started out, I worked out there are three golden rules to running a fish and chip shop, and that was, a great quality product at an affordable price, served in a pleasant bright environment and by people who were very motivated and very customer orientated. So, if you've got the right site and you can provide those products, it'll work.
Yeah. And the shops that you were sort of up against back then, were they, I don't want to be derogatory, but I guess maybe some of those things that you mentioned, like bright environment, motivated staff, probably wasn't a big deal back then because they were just maybe a bit older in the tooth back then, and you probably
Yeah.
come in as a newcomer, let's say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's something that we came on with, some new ideas, and we were trying to, always trying to move forward, and provide the best quality product for the customer. That's realistically, sort of because all our sites are in sort of established areas where we have the same customers that come into our shops on average every 10 days. They know exactly what they're going to buy, and they buy it, take it home, eat it with a knife and fork on a plate. And that is our customers. They live within 3 miles, and we've done surveys. We survey our customers once every couple of years, and I get the same answers for the last 30 years. That is our customer profile. So we're not on sort of maybe the exception of Brighton, our big restaurant in Bankers there. But on the whole, all our customers are repeat customers,
Yeah,
and they use us once every 10 days. That's our average customer.
it's pretty
So
fantastic, isn't it?
we've got to look after them.
So, although you weren't, let's say, day to day under your dad's sort of supervision, broadly, I guess, what were his expectations and what do you think you learnt from him?
Oh, I just think my dad had tremendous work ethic, and that's something that I picked up on, and all my children have got a tremendous work ethic. I mean, as you know, James, my son, who's CEO of the company, he works exceptionally hard, and I'm very proud of all my children for doing the same in their own sort of spheres, really.
Yeah.
So it's just drive, ambition, and wanting to improve.
Do you sort of think that, to those listening, that if you work hard, get your figures right, and market your product as best as you can, do you think sort of like the money will soar to follow if you can get sort of the basics right?
Yeah, I mean, I think in fish and chips, I mean, it again, I mean, it's site, 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 and site, and site, and site, and site. You get the site right, and then it's all about then just looking after your customers. As I said earlier, sort of great quality products, reasonably priced, served in a pleasant, bright environment by motivated people. So you don't want to, walk into a shop and somebody looks, yeah, what do you want? You want, hi, can I help you? Have a nice day, this sort of thing. I think, it's really important. Waitresses and waiters in our restaurants. It's very, very important.
Yeah. No, no, definitely. And when I've been into your stores over the years, I've always noticed you do get great sort of the customer service is quite high up there because I guess you do really want. I think fish and chip shop, especially, it's one of those places that I always say it's a bit like going to the barbers.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's one of those. The service has to be quite personal.
Yeah, I mean, we're very lucky. We've got a lot of staff that've been with us an awful long time, and three generations of families work for us in some stores, and they know all the local people.
Yeah.
And I think one of our, just as a sort of side issue, one of our sort of staff, Barbara in Harold Hill, has worked there for 45 years.
Wow.
And she now only does a couple of hours a week, but she loves coming in just to seeing her old customers.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
completely, because it is a way of life for the staff too.
Absolutely, yeah, it is. Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
So you then set on this course to grow the business, and then before James gets involved, how many sites did you sort of get to? When I say involved, let's say an executive level.
Oh yeah. Well, as I say, I started off and we probably had about I would guess about 20 sites when James became involved. He sort of started as I mean, he left school after his A levels, and I tried to persuade him to go to university, but he wanted to get into the business.
Fair enough. So
So
he wasn't having any of it. So of A levels, that is, and
after his A levels, yeah, he
after his A
does.
levels. Sorry.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so for you, let's say from that 0 to 20 mark, where do you think, whether it's the business itself or the growth or anything around the business, where do you think the biggest challenges lay for you? Where was one point where you were scratching your head thinking, "Oh, I've never been here before"?
Well, I think the first probably thought about that when we used peterhead cod, and the price of cod was getting to a sort of stage where it's unaffordable for us, and we couldn't pass that much on to the customer.
Yeah.
So then I sort of thought, right, well, I've got to look for alternative products. So then we sort of had a look at getting cod, container bulk cod coming in from Iceland. And sometimes it was very good. And this was in the probably mid 70s, very early 80s. Sometimes it was good and sometimes it was terrible.
Okay.
So I thought, well, this isn't going to work. So then I sort of went over to Iceland, and I got in touch with the Icelandic embassy and got some addresses. So I just sort of rocked up in Reykjavik, and funny enough, it was the same time as the Gorbachev-Reagan meeting. Can you remember that?
Yeah. I've read about it. I don't remember it.
Yeah, in Reykjavik, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was quite bizarre, actually, because I went and saw some guys and bought some fish, and we got it going on air freight back to the UK. So we used to go to Heathrow and pick it up. And when I went back to Reykjavik Airport, there was Air Force One sitting there with no one about, and I just drove round it. Now, can you imagine doing that today?
You'd be shot.
You would be, wouldn't you?
It's quite interesting. I think you'd be shot for giving it the side eye, let alone driving around it.
Yeah. But no, it's and then sort of the fish coming into the UK by air really didn't work. Sometimes again it was good, and we had sort of various problems. So then sort of I got involved with a guy who was working in England who was Icelandic, and he suggested that a friend of his got a trawler. So again, I got on my aeroplane, went back to Iceland and sat on the Sigibird with the two brothers who owned it. I took loads of photos and explained to them what we did with fish, and sort of they didn't actually know what we did with the fish.
Wow.
Yeah, so then I explained to them that fish is steamed in batter, it's not actually fried, and the whole process, and lots and lots of pictures, and I said how the texture and the colour is so important. And so after we 3 or 4 hours sitting there, they said, yeah, well, we'd like to be a partner with you. So they started fishing for us, and then about 25 years ago we needed another supplier. So we were introduced to some guys in top left-hand corner of Iceland called Ísafjörður, and Julius Germanson, who still fishes for us today. Those guys are like family to us. We know all the crew, we know the skippers, we send them beer at Christmas time, we send them videos saying thank you very much, and they do a fantastic job for us. The quality of the fish is amazing. And we also then have another supplier in Grindavik, which is near the Blue Lagoon, if you've ever been to Iceland.
Never.
All right, you should go. It's an amazing place. But so they've got 2 frozen at sea trawlers that catch for us, and so that relationship has been for over 25 years.
So because you got there sort of early, pre, I guess before they even knew what to do with the product, I guess to some degree, you got there early. You've got the volume, you've got the relationship. What made you never really maybe go down the wholesale route and supply, let's say, suppliers with that product?
We did look at that, but I mean, obviously we'd had experience of the wholesale business in Billingsgate, and it's something that I have thought about often, looked at it, and every time I've really looked at it, I've sort of went, no, I don't want to do that. So, and there were so many opportunities in those days in expanding the fish and chip retail side. And we were extremely successful with what we were doing, and in those days, and it was something that sort of I looked at and decided not to focus on.
Yeah. So you've always stuck to these 3 sort of companies in Iceland. You've never sort of bought from Norway, Faroe, and so on.
Well, we have done in very early days. I've had Faroese fish, and then we've had when things have had a delivery hitch or something. Occasionally we've used a bit of Melkart, Russian. But on the whole, it's interesting though, the difference between the Barents Sea fish and the fish around Iceland, and it's this is purely my opinion. It's that much thicker, and it's got more flavour. And I've tried to find out what is the reasoning for this, and what I've been told is that the bottom of the Bering Sea is fairly flat, and the fish don't have to work hard, whereas around Russia there's lots of currents.
Yeah.
Sorry, around Russia, around Iceland there's lots of currents, and therefore the fish have to work harder, and so they build up more muscle.
Okay. I heard a slight different variation to that, but I think you might be more right than me because you know the right people. I heard that because the water's deeper, the fish have to maybe go further down, which is what you're sort of saying. But there's also more abundance of food as well.
There is definitely more food. Yeah, I mean, a lot more krill there. So
that's it.
Yeah.
Well, again, it is really important that the fish is, got a beautiful white flesh. Otherwise, it won't come out right. And
exactly. I mean, it does sort of frustrate me a little bit because I mean, lots of other good fish that the Brits won't eat. I mean, for argument's sake, coley.
I love coley.
It's very good to eat because it's grey, a little bit grey. We can't, the public won't buy it.
We are a fussy bunch in England, aren't we? Well,
we are. Yeah,
there's no doubt. But so cast your mind back to back then. You jump on a plane a couple of times, maybe multiple times, to go sort out this fish deal. What are people thinking? Like, what are the fishmongers, saying? What are the people at Billingsgate saying that, Like, surely to them, that is like, it's anathema. You're going and buying foreign fish, So even now, sometimes people turn their nose up at it when they hear about it. You did it years ago.
Yeah. Well, as I say, we still had the business in Billingsgate then, so we were sort of a bit of an anathema because we had a wholesale business, and I was pulling in frozen at sea cod from Iceland. It was just purely price.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I couldn't afford to buy, sort of peterhead cod that was just too expensive.
Yeah. And I guess it was like H&G back then.
No, it was always Shatterpack.
Shatterpack filleted.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, Shatterpack filleted, yeah.
Oh, it's really interesting because I always wondered, like, if someone's the first at doing something, and you did it for the right reasons, I guess, for your business and your customers, it's just interesting to see what people think. And how long would you say before you were sort of proudly marketing it to your consumers? Because I guess to some degree in the early days, you probably just think they're not overly bothered, they're eating great product, it's great price. But at some point, you sort of turned it on its head and actually promoted it as well.
Yes, we did. Yeah. We, so before, sort of the sort of digital Facebook, Twitter, etc., which we've got a team that works on tirelessly, as you can probably picked up. But we used to have photos of shops, photos of the trawlers in the shops of the customers, and we would talk to the customers. This is where our fish comes from, and these are, these guys are our friends.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's a big deal, isn't it? And I guess you probably had a better relationship that you did with many of the fishermen over here, I guess. When you definitely have now, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, we never, sort of, as I say, the fish went to Billingsgate and it went out, so we didn't really have a relationship with the trawlers.
Yeah. And do you do a similar thing with potatoes over here as well?
Yes, yeah, exactly the same. Yeah, I go to last week for 2 days. I was up around Ely sorting out my potato contracts for next year, and we again got a trusted probably 8 or 9 farmers that we've worked with for a long time.
Okay.
So yeah, they know what we want and what potatoes we want, whether it's Sagita, Ramos, Piper, or Accord, or whatever. So
over the years, why have you never? And it doesn't mean that it's the best idea in the world. It's just another idea. Why have you never implemented a central sort of potato prep to supply all your stores, rather than getting all the spuds sent to all different stores?
Okay, well, we think one of our big points of sales is that everything is produced fresh every day on our premises, and that is what we try and push through on our social media. That it's, as I say, fresh product produced every single day on site by our skilled staff.
I see. It's interesting because obviously I supply quite a few chains. I know quite a few. Some buy chips prep from another company, some do it themselves, some do it like yourself. It's just always interesting understanding why people do what they do.
Yeah.
Because obviously you would have done the mental exercise at some point and said, is it worthwhile, I guess, as a business? But obviously, for whatever reason, you guys decided not to. And because it just always interests me. And again, the fish, that's done all on site as well?
Yes, yeah. So we've got our head up, our sort of, we call it the shed, our head office. where I've got a 40 pallet freezer, and we've got a big walk-in fridge that we can get probably 15 pallets in.
Okay.
So we have fish that's delivered in here, from Sal in Grimsby 3 days a week. Fresh chickens delivered every single day. Then we've got 3 transit vans, and then a 7.5 ton Mercedes truck. And each of our shops get 2 deliveries a week. Oh, sorry, 3 deliveries a week.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that's then basically that's fish and potatoes.
Yeah, but the potatoes go straight through our potato merchant.
Okay.
They don't come. Otherwise, we get through about sort of 2,000 bags a week of potatoes. So
that'd become a bit of a logistics nightmare.
Oh yeah, that would be. Yeah.
So one of the things that you also do is ribs. So have you ever is it pork ribs, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, pork ribs, rack of ribs.
Rack of ribs. Has that ever been has that ever sort of occurred to you maybe to move over something that's more inclusive, let's say lamb for argument's sake, because of the Muslim aspect, or not really?
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously you do chicken, I guess, and chicken suits Muslims, I guess.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, we do chicken, yeah. But I mean, it's just a learning curve. We bought a shop and we didn't sell ribs. And that shop, it was a shop in Basildon, or in Pitsea actually, that we bought that sold a lot of ribs. And we looked at it and thought, wow, this is good, this works, the margins are right. And then we just introduced it to all of our shops.
It's interesting, isn't it? And then, so sometimes you would buy a shop and then implement backwards.
Yeah, that's right. So if we look at a shop and we sort of look at a shop, see something works in that particular business, and can it work if we spread it across the rest of the shops?
Yeah. So talking of buying businesses, you mostly, and I might be completely wrong here, but my assumption is that TCG over the years has grown mostly on acquisition.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, we have done greenfield sites as well.
Why did you prefer that? Because obviously you're buying goodwill. There's pros and cons to buying goodwill. Obviously, one pro is that you're buying a business that's already taking, let's say, for argument's sake, 12 grand a week. That's always nice. It comes with its staff. That's always good. But I would, from the outside, be worried that you'd lose some of the goodwill, especially if it was a good trader. Like if you were there every day, I'd probably lose 10-15% after you leave. So run me through some of your other thoughts that I wouldn't understand.
Well, I think sort of that is the challenge, that when you take over, especially you cannot beat a well-run owner, mum and dad fish and chip shop. So we have to be fairly careful. So we'll go along and we'll get a phone call from one of the agents, or someone will ring us up and say, look, do you want to buy our shop, which happens quite frequently. And then we'll go along and have a look, and we'll look at the business, and we'll say, well, can we match this? Can we do better? And if the quality isn't great and the shop needs an upgrade, and maybe some of their systems aren't particularly good, we think, we can manage this, and we can improve upon it. And a lot of the shops that we have taken over, we've put 20% on the turnover, and some we've also we've got wrong as well. So it's swings and roundabouts, but on the whole, it's something that's worked for us.
Yeah. I guess. Well, obviously it has, because you're in the 40 site mark now, aren't you? Roughly. So clearly it's working. And one of the thoughts again, like when people buy fish and chip shops, some people swear by, especially independents. When I say independent, a single shop owner would swear by owning the freehold. I guess that's a slower growth or no growth at all, as in terms of sites. And then the other option is going for leases. Have you managed to do both of those? Or
yes, we have. Yeah, we've done both. It all depends which way you look at it. If you're looking purely for cash flow, then leases is the way to go. Because obviously, if you're going to net say 30% out of a good takeaway fish and chip shop, and you're going to net about 7% out of a freehold. But there is, as I said to my accountant once, freeholds don't turn up late, don't get involved with other members of staff, and don't have rows, etc. So
it's true. As an investment goes, I know one chain in particular, and it's probably they're probably a slower grow, but they do big sites and they only have freeholds apparently.
Well, look, there's an argument to be said for both.
I guess it all depends on what you also want out of your life, I guess. Yeah. Like you said, there's no wrong or right. If you want freeholds, then that makes complete sense. And if you're using those freeholds to sort of make new freeholds, that also makes sense.
Yeah.
But also, if you've got leaseholds and you've got the margin at the end of it, you can go buy property or do whatever else you want with it.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
yeah,
it's horses for courses, basically, isn't it?
yeah, it all depends, sort of. I think in the long term, there's nothing like bricks and mortar. So, and we've got some freeholds that we've purchased over the years, and they sort of sit nicely in a pension fund, and that and that works.
Yeah, no, completely. No, I'm completely with that. So, talking about the business side, because we're there now. So I like talking about the business. Why do you think? And you've probably touched on it, but there's got to be some deeper roots here. Why have the Chesterford Group managed to do what so many have failed? There isn't many chains we've got in this industry. We've got the Chesterford Group, we've got George Tradition, Deep Blue, we've got Seniors, we've got Pappers. There's a couple more. There's John Dory's in Northern Ireland. So, and if I've missed anyone out, that's not on purpose. It's just because I'm on the spot
exactly,
here. And so there's only probably 10 to 12 chains, or groups. Why do you think that is?
I think it's purely from our point of view, the way that we've managed to sort of expand successfully is because we've always managed to find high turnover sites. So the way the business started was basically with council leases, which was proved to be very successful, and then finding other sites or buying high turnover fish and chip shops, and then you can afford to have the backup staff, the relief managers and the operations managers to make sure that those shops perform. I think why maybe a lot of their fish and chip shops are just mama and papas because of the illegal side of the business. So, which is something that Paul and I are.
Whilst we're there, elaborate on that a little bit.
Well, as I say, this is coming to more and more to the fore. That the biggest, if you sort of said to me, what is the biggest change that you've seen in fish and chips, I would reflect and go back to you and say the introduction of VAT. Because sort of when VAT came in, that changed our business. Because obviously we sort of the size of our business, we obviously very, very sort of stringent on our rules and regulations, and all our VAT is paid, all our taxes are paid. And then when we go along and I can remember having a conversation with how much do you turn over? Well, how much turnover is on your accounts? Well, not very much. And sort of then saying, what gross profit are you working on? I don't know. So I said, look, why do I care? I put $3,500 a week in my pocket. Why do I care what my gross profit is? So that's a thing that we find hard to sort of cope with a little bit, and makes it a little bit difficult when sort of we have to get a particular set of gross profit that we need, a net profit, and each site sort of has to reach its targets, and then you've got the guy down the road who's giving huge portions at a cheaper price because they just want to serve customers.
So if you cast your mind back to, let's say, the year before VAT was introduced, how was it different for someone like me who's only ever known VAT on fish and chips?
Because everybody was playing on a level playing field.
So there wasn't any form of evasion or avoidance?
Not as much as there was after VAT.
So I guess back then all they had to consider, or any shop owner had to consider, was sales and just tax. Just company tax or personal tax.
Yeah, I mean I think in the old days, sort of the people would be well, as they are now. A lot of people get paid in cash.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was that, but I mean, VAT has been a big game changer.
I know. Obviously, I was born in '84, so when I ask around, a lot of people say, like my dad and people, that VAT was, it just ruined things, for them, like essentially what you're saying, and I think. It just added a complication where it didn't need to be. I think, but fast forward all these years, 30-something years, the biggest thing with VAT is that people still don't get it. consumers don't get it, they don't, and businesses still don't get it, and whether that's by choice. Even yesterday I was on Twitter and there was a chap that has loads and loads of restaurants, and he was saying, we pay VAT. And I was saying, I wasn't trying to be belligerent, but I sort of just said, surely you collect it and pass it on.
Yeah.
And he was like, no, we pay VAT.
No, you collect it and pass it on.
And I was just like, and I think he thought I was being a bit of a knob. So I just thought, I'm not going to say it anymore because he's not getting the basics.
Well, you see, a lot of our competitors collect it but don't pass it on.
All right, so it's a one-step process, okay.
Yeah. So you see, again, the attitude is, well, I don't care what my gross profit is. All I want to do is serve customers.
Yeah.
And then I can, sort of siphon off 20% straight away.
Yeah. So I guess for that type of trader, they don't have to worry about gross profit or net profit, because net profit, they've got the what you're suggesting is the VAT cushion to fall on.
Yeah, and also an NI cushion as well if they're paying the staff in cash.
So
if you actually, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, so if you look at it, sort of against, sort of legal business, they've probably got about a 35%.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's impressive, isn't it?
Yeah. If you think about NI, you think about VAT, corporation tax.
So being devil's advocate for a moment, if it's 35% more, roughly, let's say, you can, excuse me, you can see why they do it. Where do you think the error lies? Obviously it's the person doing it always. In the eye of the law, it's the person doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But in your mind, why is the government letting it sort of slide? And not just this government, I mean successive government.
Going back, I tried very hard about 20 years ago. And one of the problems that, sort of senior people in VAT said to me that if they could charge the people, arrest them and hold them in prison until the court case came up, it would be a game changer for them. Because then they said it cost about 120,000 to get a case to court.
I remember.
And then basically when they got to court, the guy had disappeared.
Well, you see, and I think that the UK law is generally weak on this. I don't know much about any other laws, to be honest. Any other countries' laws. But I was listening, again, because I listen to a lot of podcasts. And I was listening to a podcast about a loophole in the fashion industry, textiles industry. And there's companies in Leicester that make clothes all over the world, in Bangladesh and so on. And some actually made over here in Leicester. And it was a BBC podcast, and they were saying how companies were running up maybe £2 million worth of VAT bills, as we call it, and then closing the company and moving on. And even the HMRC couldn't do anything about that. And we're talking millions. And I was thinking, and then Mark Drummond, who's in the industry up north, he's the one that sent me the link, and he said, if the HMRC don't do anything about these multi-million-pound thefts, what makes you feel confident that they'll do anything about this scale?
Well, this is it. I sort of was told that basically the fraud squad weren't interested in anything under $250,000 a year.
Okay.
Because it was just not worth it.
Interesting.
And then I have sort of had it said to me that in the end the VAT cash does get back into the economy because people spend it.
But that don't help you in your business, I guess.
Absolutely.
So it probably helps the government in some way because it comes through the wash in some way. So someone will buy a new car or, like you say, new telly or whatever. So that money does go through the wash. But from a business point of view, how have you managed to navigate this within the business over the years? The two sets of rules that you're essentially saying.
Well, we've just had to sort of just try and say, right, we can't give as big a portion as the person down the road, so we've got to provide a better quality product. Our staff have got to be more professional, and the environment, our shops have got to be modern. They've got to be bright, and we've also the last few years been working very hard on our customer database, our social media, and so we try to give our customers the product. We've got quite a good strong brand in Essex, where we've got probably 25 shops, shops. And so therefore we have got a lot of very loyal customers as well.
So you've stuck to your tried and tested formula, essentially added a few new bolt-ons for being in the modern world, but essentially is the same thing. It's keep doing what we do, great customer service, great product, you know. And there was one thing that I noticed. What year was it? It could have been 2009. I went to, I'm going to say, one of your sites in Essex, which means nothing to you because you've got lots in Essex. But I went to one of your sites, and I remember seeing you guys at the awards afterwards, you and James, and I noticed that when I had a piece of fish, there was bone in it. And I sort of mentioned it to you at the time because I was completely alien to it. And I walked in and I said to the lady, I said, I'm not upset. I said, I'm from the fish and chip industry. I'd only just started Sarah's, essentially. And I said to her, there's bone in my fish, and she was like, yeah, I know. And I was like, and I was just completely flabbergasted. And then but after that you took the decision to remove the bone.
Well, we J-cut, but there'll still be some bone. There'll still be some bones in the fish, but again, it's areas, isn't it? I mean, in the southeast, or sort of around London, there's skin on fish. All our cod is skin on.
Oh, really?
Now, so I mean, if you go north, I mean, we've got about two. We've got a shop in Eastbourne that's skinless because the local area is skinless. We've got a shop in Bracknell that's skinless, but all the rest of our cod is skin on because that is the tradition, and also I think it holds better in the cabinet.
I'd agree.
Yeah, no, it's easier to handle. So again, it's just tradition.
Too,
it's sort of with our shops, the further away from London we get, the more haddock we sell.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you're sort of, it's just basically cod in and around London, just around the M25, where sort of, we're quite strong. But as I say, then if you went up to, say, Yorkshire, it'd all be haddock, and Scotland's all haddock, isn't it?
Pretty much. It's interesting, because I guess that would have been really helping your margins, as well, because if you've got bone in and skin on, that must be quite beneficial in some ways.
Yeah, the only thing is though, you obviously get you get less yield with skin on than you do with skinless, because obviously so you're paying for the per kilo the amount of skin on the fish you're paying for. Which if you get skinless and boneless, you're not. But then it's dearer if it's skinless and boneless, so it balances itself out really.
No, exactly. No, it's really interesting, very interesting. So your son James comes into the business after he finishes college. What was that like for you? You've now got the next generation coming in. Was it, I guess, to some degree exciting? Was there other emotions as well? Was there other emotions?
Well, it's something that James, wanted to do, and I used to take him round the shops when he was a kid in the car, and he was always a standing joke in our family. He thought all cars smelled of fish and chips. Because I used to, go out on a Saturday night in the early days and deliver 150 fish and chips in the back of my Volvo.
Wow.
But then, sort of things change. But no, I mean, it's something that he wanted to do, and absolute credit to him. He, came along. He started off as a chip boy, then he became an assistant manager, then a manager, then an operations manager, and then he moved into, sitting with me in the office, and it's something that I'm exceptionally proud of what he's achieved and what he's going to achieve in the future.
So you didn't have this. I guess there's always a sense of nepotism, but there wasn't this sense of, all right, he's the boss's son. Like, or there's always a degree of that, maybe.
Yeah, I think there must be, but I think James has, James has, got everybody's respect, because they know that James goes out every Friday tea time and fries fish and chips in the shop, and so does Paul, our MD. And Paul has been with the company all his life, and so he knows fish and chips inside out, upside down.
Yeah. So in sort of that respect, you've mentored more than one person, because you've had Paul, and I'm sure there's others in the business that. Yeah. So. Yeah. Because growing a business is more about, especially in this business, yes, you sell fish and chips. That's one aspect of your business, and you make ribs, but that's just what consumers see. But in actual fact, you've groomed the next generation, so you can get close to retirement, I guess. But I guess maybe that wasn't the intention initially. Maybe it was just do less.
No, it wasn't. No. I mean, I think, if you sort of, sometimes people say to me, what do you think your greatest achievement is? And I always say, so well, on a personal level, sort of having 4 children, 8 grandchildren, and a sort of wife that somehow put up with me for about 54 years or something. Um, and then on a business level, again, is having guys that work for us for, 30 or 40 years. And, Paul was brought up in above one of our shops in Houghton Regis because his dad was my first operations manager or relief manager. And then we've got Wayne Shaw, who's our head of operations. He lived in a flat above Chingford Hatch, where we had a shop in Chingford in London, and he started working for us at the age of 14 as a chip boy. And he came along, and it's one of my sort of great pride that these guys now are very, very sort of very integral to running a multi-million pound business.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that stands out to me as an outsider is how much you help other fish and chip shops. Maybe not the ones on your doorstep, but over COVID, Paul and Wayne were on
Yeah.
Facebook helping other fish and chip shops. Sometimes it was respected, sometimes it wasn't. I don't even know why,
Yeah.
but they were putting their neck on the line. But and you just think, and also I think one of the things that I think people don't realise is that I do think once the industry saw over COVID that the Chesterford Group were getting their sites back open, I almost feel like the rest of the industry thought, well, if they're doing it, we're going to do it. And I do think sometimes
Yeah.
you do need a leader to push through, like to say, we're opening, it's cool, guys, we're opening. And everyone else is like, yeah, we're opening too because they're opening. And everyone needs someone else to say they're doing it. And I think the fact that you open, it just meant everyone could just carry on opening without having a heavy heart.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I sat there and watched Boris on television saying, we're going to shut the country down. So I phoned James up, and, sort of straight away and said, we're going to have to shut tomorrow. And, we shut all, I don't know, 38 branches or whatever it was then. And then we thought, well, the next thing is, go into survival mode. How long can we survive for? And James and Paul got together and they decided they were going to, how the phoenix going to rise from the ashes. And they just did an absolutely incredible job. Luckily, we were doing some delivery, so we got some experience. But we opened a shop in Pitsea first of all with click and collect and delivery, and it was incredibly busy. So sort of great sigh of relief. We could all sleep at night. We knew we weren't going to go bankrupt, and having to worry about sort of then probably 600 people's livelihoods and managers' mortgages and everything. So we thought, yeah, we can make this work. And then within another 3 weeks, we got all of the shops open, and we were incredibly busy through COVID. And some of our staff were absolutely outstanding. They were just saying, look, just tell us where you want us to be, we'll be there.
There was a lot of people that just wanted to get out of the house and go to work.
Yeah, possibly. But,
Yeah.
I mean, as a staff, our staff are absolutely outstanding. They were just sort of saying, look, we're all sort of we're all in this together, which is something I think, which is something we've worked on as a sort of family for many years to try and get a real family feel to the business.
Was there anything else in your years that felt COVID like that, or was that the only thing you could think of? Was there anything that threatened your business as much as that?
No, there wasn't, but I'm so old that I can remember that when we had a 3-day week and power cuts.
Yeah.
In the early 70s, so I'd be frying away now my shop in Stevenage, it's our third shop, I think, and I was frying there, and suddenly all the power would go off. And
Just
you
like
go,
that.
yeah, just like that. You go, okay. And there was rubbish
So
piling up in the streets. And
gas stayed on, so could you keep serving or not?
no,
Really?
the gas.
No.
The,
Oh, all
yeah,
power.
yeah, well, you couldn't manage without the extraction motor anyway. So the electricity went
True.
off, and you couldn't operate. End of.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
so that was pretty threatening. I mean, there's been various other bits, and obviously with Brexit coming up, I could see that being a big problem. That's affected us because obviously we've lost a lot of Eastern European staff, and our suppliers are struggling like crazy in the UK, trying to get people to work in sort of chicken factories. In our suppliers in Scotland who supply our scampi, they struggle to get Scottish people to work in a scampi producing factory. And our pie suppliers are the same in Wales. They have a real problem there, struggle like crazy for staff. So as I say, Brexit was a big thing.
Yeah.
for
So I
us.
guess there was lots of little, well, not little, I wouldn't say little, severe, but nothing as critical. I bet that the closest one was probably the energy just going off. That would probably be the biggest one.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
And
I
I
mean, and
guess,
then
go on, sorry, go on.
I was going to say, and then sort of the energy now is a big problem.
Yeah.
So where we are, sort of luckily we're had a contract for 3 years which runs out in August and September, and if we'd have renewed our gas and electricity in September, our bills would have increased to 4.5 million, and we would have gone bankrupt like every other fast food or sort of factory or any high energy user.
Yeah.
So, sort of they have come down, and at the moment we think it's probably going to cost us about an extra 500,000 a year, something like that.
I do feel like utilities are going to cost us more than they did, but not as much as they did.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
I think we're going to have to get used to the fact that it's not going to be what it was.
Yeah. Oh, yes. I don't think that's it's going to go back to the sort of a year ago or 2 years ago.
What was it like through the because now we're also in high interest rate, not as nowhere near as much as the 80s, let's say, or the 70s. So what was it like growing the business then with high interest? Like, what was, so you'd be setting up a shop. I take it you saved before you did a shop, or did you actually just get loans like you would now?
I just got loans. We were with NatWest Bank for 25 years, and then they sort of had a few problems, and we didn't get on very well with our particular commercial manager. And since then, we've been with HSBC, that we got a great relationship with.
I just wonder what it'd be like back then. Like, if interest rates were, let's say late 70s, early 80s, in the 20s, give or take,
Yeah,
on
yeah,
capex, and
yeah,
you still carried on just investing in the shops. But I guess you were still in the throwback of lots of footfall, I guess. But
yeah, exactly.
has that changed your business model somewhat? And does that put you in a more better position now because you've been there before?
Yeah, I think so. We've had the experience of sort of almost a 3-day week. I've had the experience of inflation over 20%, and sort of labour. Till the recession of about 8 years ago, we were struggling like crazy for staff.
Mm.
That was really difficult, and then the recession came, and suddenly we had no staff problems.
It's weird.
So yeah, it just goes in swings and roundabouts, and yeah.
Do you think labour in England will ever, or in the UK, shall I say, do you think it's ever going to be like somewhere like Australia, where labour is quite expensive?
Well, I mean, as I say, it is beginning to move that way, because I mean, obviously now the minimum wage has gone up by just over 10% this year, which sort of I just find that the fact that the government have put minimum wage up by 10.5% will only offer nurses 6% or whatever. I just find that a little bit bizarre, and
Yeah, it's
not
a little. I didn't consider
yeah.
it like that actually. That is,
Yeah, well, I mean, I just sort of just thinking about it the other day, and I thought this seems peculiar. So they tell us how much we've got to put our wages up by minimum wage, 10.5%,
Mm.
but they're not offering NHS workers that.
A few people that like to espouse free market economics say that the minimum wage soon becomes the maximum wage. And that's because it is so high that actually your skill level goes down. You don't want to
Yeah.
pay someone anymore. Whereas
Hmm.
if they come in at, let's say, for argument's sake, £7 an hour, start the training, you think, well, actually, this person's doing really well. I want to
Yeah.
make this person a fryer or a manager or a relief manager.
Hmm.
And then next thing you know, you then put them on a higher tier and they earn more. Whereas when the skill level is lower and they've got no intention of doing better because, well, I'm going to get £12 an hour anyway, so why should I bother? So it almost
Yeah.
becomes like that becomes the maximum wage.
Yeah. Well, sort of, you're just referring to Australia now. As my eldest son lives in Australia, so I'm going there on Saturday for the first time for 4 years actually. So I'm looking forward to that. But before 4 years ago in Australia, a lot of the restaurants you basically get double time for working on unsocial hours.
Hmm.
So you can go into the centre of Hobart in Tasmania or Melbourne, and on Sunday a lot of shops won't be open because they can't afford to open because of the extra wages they have to pay. And then if you go into a restaurant, you'll pay extra on your bill because it's a Saturday or a Sunday.
Like a surcharge, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Labour surcharge, basically.
But I guess, like, who wants to go to? I'm just trying to think. Like, if you're at work, you can't go to a restaurant. So, I sort of feel like at any time when you'd want to go to a restaurant, you're going to end up paying a surcharge because that is going
Yeah,
to,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and that's what happens. And they say a lot of restaurants don't open on Saturday and Sunday because they don't want to, they can't take enough money to pay for the extra staff costs.
Interesting. Very
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah. So, what's the one thing do you think over the years that you look at the business now and just don't understand? Like, obviously you've been in the business for all these years, you've
Yeah.
probably had your finger on everything, but now there must be something you look at and think, nah, that's not for me.
Uh, it's an interesting question. Um, I think if I'm, sort of looking to the future, one of the things that just does concern me about fish and chips is where fish prices are going to go, and that is a serious concern to me. And that is one of the reasons why we've, sort of started to diversify.
Hmm.
And you probably know that we've taken on the Pret a Manger franchises for Cambridge, Essex, and Hertfordshire.
Hmm.
And the reason that James and I sort of started talking was about 3 or 4 years ago.
Hmm.
And because I was more and more concerned, and I could only see fish prices going one way. And then, where is the sort of mark going to become before fish and chips is unaffordable? And certainly, we found that when we put our prices up, our demand for fish dropped, but it is now actually coming back again.
But that would be, I guess, would that be normal with, let's say, over the years when you've been through a tough patch, let's say 2008 and other recessions, would
Hmm.
that be similar?
Well, no, because in 2008, we didn't have escalating fish prices.
Mm.
We just had a recession. But obviously, because of the sort of 30% tax that the government put on Russian cod and haddock coming into the UK, plus the fact that people aren't buying, Russian fish so much that it's put more pressure on Icelandic fish and
Yeah.
fish from Norway and Faroe Isles, and also the quotas have dropped as well. I mean,
Yeah.
don't quote me, but I think that the Icelandic quota dropped by about 12% for next year and about 20% in Russia. But
Wow.
the Russian quota hasn't come into effect particularly because they can't push it into England without the tax.
Yeah. And I guess if you're, if you're fishing, if your fishing vessel is primarily whitefish fillets like cod or haddock,
Hmm.
although we're a tiny little country, I guess UK is where you want to be because that we've got a market that just wants to eat that up.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
our supplier in Iceland, biggest market's the UK by far. Then in East Europe, they supply into America.
Boston areas, isn't it? They say.
Yeah, they send fish there, and then the other thing is they catch redfish, which goes to
Hmm.
Japan. They catch sort of halibut. They'll catch saithe. So they do catch, and they've got various markets around the world for various products that they catch.
Yeah. So one interesting question about we spoke about how you mentored James and Paul and Wayne and numerous others, but in, like, let's say the metaphorical boardroom, you've been making decisions for a long time, and then what's it like when you all don't agree? How do you overcome disagreement as a business?
Well, normally, sort of we, because I think that on the whole we're fairly, through maybe the mentoring and growing as a company, we're all sort of paddling in the same canoe. Obviously, there's things that we disagree about. I mean, James and I, sort of will have disagreement, and then we go for a pint afterwards. We won't discuss it, or the family come round to our house for Sunday lunch, and we tend not to discuss business. Or sort of, I went to rugby with James on Saturday, and we just didn't really talk about work. We just talked about rugby and
And
family.
is that a discipline that's come with time?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, I sort of sit there and because I'm a bit of a technophobe. I'm not great with sort of social media, to say the least. I don't do Facebook and I don't Twitter or anything. So, but no, I mean on the whole, we um, it works pretty well because we've all came through the same business together, and we all agree on the same principles. But obviously, we disagree, and then normally, then yeah, I sort of say, if Paul and James agree and I disagree, and the FD agrees with Paul and James, then I say
It's a
right,
goer.
fine, it's a goer. Yeah. I mean, there's sort of very very few times when I've sort of jumped up and down and stamped my feet, if you like,
Yeah.
because as I say, on the whole, it works well. And the way the business is working at the moment is, Paul's running the fish and chip side of the business, and so we've got another business that we're buying at the moment, which is a busy takeaway and restaurant. And then we've got our fifth Pret opening in Bishop Stortford in about 3 weeks' time, and then we got another 4 or 5 on the way. So and James is pretty much involved in that, and he sort of did incredibly well. We're the only company to be awarded a franchise that had got no franchise experience.
Okay.
Yeah, so to say,
Right.
James and our FD just did a fantastic job at selling for us.
So I've had a moment to percolate on what you said about Pret in your earlier comments, and about, let's say, protein prices with fish, and obviously chicken prices are probably, although they've gone down over the years, they're probably going to creep
Yeah,
up somewhat as well.
well,
Um,
yeah. I mean,
so
they've always been pretty stable chicken prices.
of course, yeah, and so do you worry about the average consumer not being able to, especially if they're not willing to eat another protein, or a seafood, let's say like
Hmm.
coli, you know, fish and chips, is it in your mind not going to be as affordable as it used to be?
Well, I mean, this is what we'll see now, isn't it? Because at the moment you've got falling demand because of the prices. You've got falling catches because of the Russian war and the quota reductions. So it's rather like potatoes is in the same situation where you've got falling demand, less people eating potatoes in the UK, and the farmers are growing less potatoes. So where is the sweet spot going to be on prices? And it's
Mm,
exactly the same for fish. Um, as I say, you can't underestimate the effect of the sort of war in Ukraine on fish supplies in the UK. Because
yeah.
when you consider 40% of all common haddock came into the UK came out of the Barents Sea, so
It's a
that's
big number.
huge.
Yeah.
That is huge.
So let's assume that the markets do what they do, and the fish that used to come here ends up going somewhere else, probably China, and then different fish ends up coming to us in the UK. So hopefully it all evens out. There is lower demand globally. Um,
I think that's a thing that I think I disagree or say that I think one of the big problems is that demand globally is
mhm.
rising for fish. Because
Okay.
for argument's sake, if you take Eastern Europe 20 years ago or 15 years ago, um, Russia used to just scoop anything out of the sea, freeze it in blocks, and that would go on the Russian market.
Okay.
But now, as Poland is getting more affluent, and sort of Estonia, Latvia, all these countries, they're tending to eat more fish, and the middle class Russian is eating more fish and more, and obviously wanting better quality fish. So I think that one of the problems is that in Europe the rising demand for fish is affecting supplies. Um, and it's interesting with sort of fish farms. I mean, I've been sort of involved in Iceland with the guys trying to farm cod, and it's not worked out particularly well for sort of various reasons that they eat each other in the various year groups. The flesh tends to be a bit softer because they don't have to work hard in a pen. So it is going to be interesting, and I could only see sort of fish rising in price gradually, and it's just
So,
where it will end.
although its biggest benefit is the fact that it's wild, it's probably also the
Hmm.
biggest negative at the same time,
Yes,
isn't
it
it?
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and
Because
again, just rising demand as well.
yeah, yeah, no, definitely. No, it's really interesting. You know, I just think about it, and fish and chips has always been a value for money proposition. Customers know what they were getting. It's usually
Yeah.
on the
Hmm.
cheaper side of the market. You're eating out, it's cheap. but it does feel like at the moment that it is maybe slightly out of sync. That doesn't mean it won't correct itself, or at least other things might go up and then make it look. But it does feel like that some of the other fast food offerings, which we've always been up against, have
Hmm.
stayed quite cheap, or at least they look quite cheap.
Yes, I think I'd agree with you. I mean, it sort of, but you, if you're sort of say for argument's sake, talking about sort of the two big burger chains, McDonald's and Burger King. I mean, the product in McDonald's is incredibly cheap.
Mm,
I think for about £7.50 you can get a Big Mac, chips, and a drink. And whereas we're £10.20 for medium cod chips. But you say that, then if you go and get a steak in a restaurant, and in this area, in the sort of around Bishop Stortford, you're talking for £30 for a steak and chips in a restaurant or in a gastropub.
yeah,
So everything's relative, but it's just sort of how does the person sort of would I personally I'd much rather pay £10.20 for a cod and chips than I would for a McDonald's or a Burger King. But
yeah.
that's just personal tastes. So sort of it's it's just where it'll be in the future in the next 18 months
I
and
guess
where.
McDonald's are just using their huge scale to keep those
Oh,
prices down, and
yeah, it's an incredible
yeah,
business, amazing business. I mean, you think that I can be in Tasmania and I can go into a McDonald's and exactly the same as the one that's 2 miles from my house, and it is just an amazing business.
yeah. So as you've sort of been in the business for as long as you have, um, what would you say that you would do differently if you had your time again?
What would I do differently? I suppose probably expanded faster.
Okay, and what sort
Yeah.
of, like, looking back, what was that made you didn't do that? Was it
It's probably lack of experience because sort of my dad just had the one shop, and sort of I basically sort of managed to borrow some money to buy my first shop, and then I just went through sort of basically going to see NatWest Bank, putting down 20%, borrowing 80%, paying that back over 5 years, and then moving on. But I was fairly sure that I didn't want to, as I got bigger in, say, the last 20 years, I didn't want to be holden to a VC company. That's
mm,
something that I was fairly sure that I didn't want to do. And as James got more involved and Paul got more involved, sort of running the businesses, that's something that we did not want to do.
and I guess that's what you've probably done over the years is you've built a solid foundation for a next layer of growth.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Whereas a lot of people today, you see these valuations from these VCs, and it makes you wonder what are they valuing.
Yeah, no, it's yeah, and also, sort of produce a spreadsheet. Say you're going to open 5 shops in, first year, 8 shops in, second year, 12 shops. And as you know, that the biggest problem in fish and chips is to find the good quality units with high turnover. Basically you want 1,000 square feet, auto takeaway, taking 15, 18,000 a week or even more, and they come up very rarely.
Yeah.
So you're at a struggle. You've borrowed X amount of money from a VC, and then you struggle like crazy to find the sites to expand, or you end up paying too much for the businesses because to encourage them to sell.
Yeah. And if you're buying a shop that takes 15, 18 grand a week, and let's say it was a family run chip shop, you're going to lose some there. You're going to lose, at least initially, there's going to be a bit of a dip.
Well, yeah.
And a
So
VC is
yeah,
not going to accept that. So,
no,
like,
exactly. Yeah,
so if you tell them that I've just paid top money for this 18 grand
yeah.
a week shop and now it's doing 14 for 3 years, they're
Hmm.
going to be like, what are you playing at? This ain't a great
Yeah,
business
exactly.
model.
It's
Yeah.
yeah. So that's anyway. It's something that we decided that we wouldn't do. So
Mm.
yeah. So as I say,
So,
basically,
what's next for Hugh? What's the next in the, what's the plan? You're going Australia.
yeah,
Is
yeah.
retirement imminent, or is it more just take it easy?
It all it all depends realistically. Sort of how the next few months are going to pan, how we're going to come out of the sort of pandemic, how sort of what the next few months hold for our company. I'm, sort of at the age where I'm, 71 last week actually. So I'm at the age where, I could be quite happy to retire. But if I can, provide any help and value and, any sort of mentoring to Paul and James, then I'm more than happy to.
Yeah.
So I think my wife might divorce me if I stay at home.
Yeah.
I've only ever been at home on a Sunday.
Yeah, I've been at home for one afternoon, and I think I'm bothering the wife.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so.
But I guess you've always been so focused on growing the business that you probably didn't spend a lot of time at home.
No, I mean, as I say, it's just something, well, I think one of the silly things I've sort of said to myself is that when I get up at 7 o'clock in the morning, get in the shower, and I think, I actually don't want to do this anymore, then I'm going to, then that'll be that. But it hasn't come yet. So, yeah.
Yeah. And you still enjoy eating fish and chips?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I really enjoy them. I sort of pop into the shop when I'm driving around and, have some fish and chips. Or I've got a shop that's about 4 miles from my house, actually, in Sawston near Cambridge. And so I'll pop in there and have fish and chips. But no, I think it's a great product. And it's well cooked, and you've got good quality chips. I think it's a very, very good meal. Got to be hungry to really appreciate fish and chips. But no, I think it's a great meal, and also we've got a great range that you can buy. We go from burgers to sort of whole racks of ribs to southern fried chicken, roast chicken, pies, sausages, saveloys, and then we do lots of specials as well. So especially at the moment, I mean, the guys have come up with some two things that have been very successful for us. We're doing a sort of chicken dinner, so you can buy half a fresh chicken for $4.99 with a portion of chips, and that'll feed 2 people. So that's a great deal. And we do a discount on Fishy Mondays. And then, of course, at the moment, with our 100 years, we're doing a lot of promotions, so we're working very well.
Well, consumers love a good promotion, especially when it's something they like. So they'd be crazy not to take up on it, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing 25% discount all through January on fish and chips on a Friday, which is a great deal for the customers, and it's really pushed football, which is really good. And then in February we've got some more promotions going through as well. So
wow, it's all go then, isn't it?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Well, you're not going to be around because you're going to be on holiday, so you're not going to be here to help.
I'll be leaf plucking and driving tractors on a vineyard.
Well, that sounds better, but yeah, try not to do too much, won't you?
Yeah, well, not really me though, actually.
Oh, Hugh. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Pleasure.
I think we've touched on so many great topics, and just have a great holiday, and we'll talk again soon.
Yeah, so I'll be in Sydney next Monday, so I'm looking forward to that.
Nice, that sounds amazing. And the weather's meant to be good over there?
Yeah, it'll be about 30 degrees. Then I'm flying up to Brisbane on the Tuesday, and then my son and daughter or daughter-in-law and my granddaughter are meeting us. Then we're going on the beach for a week.
Oh, I'm jealous.
Yeah, so it'll be good.
All right, Hugh. Well, thank you for your time, my friend.
Okay, all right. Speak to you soon and keep well.
You too. What did you all think of that episode with Hugh Lipscombe? I really enjoyed it, and I know some of the comments I get is, oh yeah, you always say you enjoy them, but in actual fact I don't really talk to people that I don't enjoy talking to. So that is why I always say I enjoy talking to somebody, because I know them, and if I don't know them, I've chosen them because I actually want to talk to them. So always send us your feedback. We love to hear it. Jump over to worldofceres.com/shop and download your free copy of the Fish and Tips ebook. Like I said previously, 27 chapters of absolute goodness. You won't agree with everything, but it just gives you a laser sharp focus on your business. If you want to keep in the loop with what we're doing at Ceres, then you should be following us on social media. But in order to get what's happening with us as fast as possible before it goes on social media, is join our mailing list. The link will be in the episode notes, and be sure to share this podcast with your friends and on social media, because if you like this episode, then chances are others in our industry will love it too.